let us welcome our second speaker for today's session on mobile. It's Maciej Mróz from GameDesire, strongly represented today, GameDesire.
Okay, hello everyone. So my topic is about more of a money side of things, not the game design side of things, but I hope it won't be too boring or some of you find it interesting. I want to warn you that what I'm saying might not be directly applicable to other companies. It's just a story of how we do things, how we say things, and it's maybe starting point of discussion if anyone is interested later about it, of how this could be improved. So with that warning, let's go on. I hope some of you heard about GameDesire. We are around 100 people here in Krakow. Our history is reaching quite far into the past, because I've been with the company for more than 10 years. I think it's 13 right now. And what's really cool about our company is that we've always done free-to-play games, at least for as long as I'm here. And we've done them on multiple platforms. Obviously, our main source of revenue is social casino games, but what we are experimenting with is a lot of casual titles, and on both web and mobile platforms. So yes, as everyone, we grew up doing web games, but right now most of our focus is on mobile, obviously, iOS and Android. We still do some web development. This is currently typically based on Unity and WebGL, but you know, we go with the times, and right now probably 80% of what we do is mobile. And the technology, again, company built by engineers. So this is important because it sets the context for what I'm going to talk about. We love coding, we love numbers, we love databases, and so on. And we built most of our tech ourselves. This starts from the backend platform for our games, which is proprietary. We don't use anything above, say, basic services like Amazon. Our servers are written in C++, written by ourselves. This has been in development for a very long time. And this is really something that I believe gives us quite an edge when we start a new game, because we have most of the problems solved already. Obviously, we work with mobile tech, which is right now kind of torn between Unity and C++ using Qt library, which is kind of interesting. I encourage everyone to look at it. And this is quite important. And the last but not least, as I say, we do our own data engineering and analytics. We tried different solutions in the past, but what I'm going to talk about, we probably couldn't do if we relied on a third party. Some of them are pretty good, don't get me wrong. It's just that we've got so many different places where our users are in different platforms that for us it would probably not be possible to integrate the data and to automate a lot of things that we are automating. Because what I'm going to talk about is not about how to calculate the KPIs, it's more about what you do with the KPIs. So this is the main topic of this talk. Say, you know your D1, D7, or whatever KPIs you are tracking, but how can you predict if the game is going to do well in financial terms? Because, you know, games are creative business, but they are still business. And the amount of data that you have in a soft launch phase is pretty limited. obviously know your D1 pretty quickly, but say monetization is a lot tougher to get the hang of. You need longer time and bigger cohorts of users, and this data flows to you in sort of continuous manner. And what I'm going to talk about is how we went to the point where we have a revenue model that we can update as the data flows in. So it becomes more and more accurate as the game progresses into the soft launch. Again, it is something that works for us. It's not something that can be packaged and used by other companies, but I hope it will be an inspiration. So yes, why we did it? It's really about minimizing the risks of failed investments. When we talk about free-to-play games, it's really about something that's going to run for years, and it's about something that's going to cost money for years. And it's going to bring money for years, obviously, but generally, as in every business, you want to make more than you spend. And because there are many projects that fail, and I can't really find any big company that hadn't had a project that didn't perform to expectations. It happened to us also. Because you have that, then those projects that really make money need to make a lot more to make up for those that don't. Yeah, we would all love that if our all games were making money. That's great, but in reality, it doesn't always happen, especially if you are a big company that's existed for 15 years. So yeah, failures do happen, but what's important is that you need to find those failures early and to just cut your losses and move on to something else. And this is important part of the challenge, because game making is emotional. We all love the games that we make. The teams get engaged, and then then there is still reality. The numbers need to add up. So yes, what we found is that the early development before the soft launch is pretty predictable. You can probably just take the project management book, someone who worked as a game producer, and just do it. Obviously, you need to control scope. There will be some unknowns and so on, but it is predictable. But what happens after the launch is really big investment and quite an unknown. A lot of things are happening, and this is both on the cost side and on the revenue side, obviously. I'm not really touching that much on user acquisition here, but it is a big part of running any game, especially on mobile right now. So what you need, and this is kind of a jump in a logic, because I missed one slide that I was going to add, but what you need is to start with user lifetime value model. This is something that everyone's been talking about, but how does it relate to the revenue of the product itself as a whole? And obviously, the easiest thing to do is just to try to use the lifetime model, say, overlapping in time. So you start a new cohort every day, and you add whatever you had from the previous day, and you start a new cohort, and whatever you had from the previous day, and start a new cohort, and so on and so on. So this is like, say, an integration in maths. And this creates some simple models, as I say, and everyone who's been interested in lifetime value models in general probably has seen them, because the simplest one is simply using geometric series. So it assumes constant retention and constant monetization, and then you simply use those as an input to something that we know from high school. And this is something that I hope everyone has seen many times, and we've been using it for years. It's still good for like back of the envelope calculation, and that's okay. because everything I'm talking about is going to be about modeling, and it will never be completely accurate. But what's really important for us is to capture those things that vary over time and to capture them accurately in a model. Because, if you have better model, then you can probably make better decisions using the model. So what we've come up with, this is actually something I coded in my spare time. I still do that from time to time, but still, we actually tried to take into account that retention varies over time. So your D1, D7, D28 is going to be different, and the retention curve isn't really like simple what you would expect from geometric series, but actually behaves a bit differently. And this is interesting because actually after putting in the numbers from our real product, I found something that's a lot more accurate than the previous model. But what was important is that we've built is an interactive website. So because JavaScript today is quite fast, it's pretty much say half the speed of compiled native code. You can do those things in an interactive way. So it's not pretty, okay? But I put it on our intranet in a company, and you can see that you can say move the DARPU. I still assumed constant and monetization. You can move the specific retentions. You can also incorporate the user acquisition costs and number of users that you are buying every day. And it does this integration and say, okay, you are going to earn this much month by month. It's still not very precise, but because it models the variability of the retention, it's a lot more precise than the simple LTV models. And it already models the revenue of the user. So it assumes constant registrations, obviously. But this really shows, and it was really huge for us, that it showed how valuable long-term retention of users is. Once we start playing with the sliders, it also shows how the compositions of your users changes over time. So people say that aging of users, say that bigger percentage of users are long-time users is wrong, that the game is getting older, but it's actually expected. It's actually expected that, this is like this part that you have here as a blue is users that are with your game for less than a month. So the better your retention, at some point you will have more and more users who are long-time users. This is interesting game design consideration that, early in the game lifetime, you probably need just good onboarding and you have a lot of new users, so you need to focus on them. But later in the game, you actually need those things that long-time users expect. So again, this is still theoretical model, but reality is a lot tougher, as we found out. And our analysts work on that stuff every day. I'm not a statistician. I'm a computer scientist by my education. So if I make any mistake in statistical terms, just forgive me for that. But this is something that we decided, okay, it's good, it's nice, it's really liked by people in our company, and it's a lot more accurate. But for financial modeling, we actually need something more accurate, and this is why we did that. So this is from one of our games, and honestly, I don't know which one, but this is one of the longer running games, and we see cohort. Each of those lines is actually users registering in specific month, and you see that you have clear outliers. They are not as clean as smooth curves. So this is reality when it goes to monetization. This is obviously trimmed at 12 months because you have to trim at some point. But then again, maybe it's wrong choice for some games because we have a game where we had cohorts of users that actually monetize significantly even after 3 years. So yes, that's also a choice that you have to make, and it's up to your analyst to do it. So this is probably something that most companies don't have. We had this historical data, but really what you can start with and think about from the very beginning is to know what % of cohort value you are getting over time and be able to segment that data, because your users will be different and your cohorts will be different, and you need to be able to observe that. But what's important is that shape of this curve really depends on the game. So this is something that we really found as quite interesting, that when we use theoretical model, the first 2-3 months are really differing a lot from theoretical model that assumes sort of smoother transitions, because this is what really comes from game design. But after a longer time, really sort of, and this is our case, I'm not saying every game is like that, but for our games, what we found out was that, say, if the user stays for us with 3 months, it's still paying users, the monetization sort of becomes constant. What's really becoming important is just churn. So just keeping the users, but they are spending more or less constantly. If they are a high spender, they are still high spender. If they are spending low amounts, they are still spending low amounts. There is some things that we try to do about it, but it's got limited impact. So what happens is that the theoretical model starts to be more or less in line with reality, but the first 2-3 months are not. So it's good to have this sort of like approximation where it's just % of cohort value over time. And again, it's not as simple, because say when analyzing smaller cohorts of users, there is a lot of uncertainty, and this is really where analysts come in. So our model that we use for financial modeling uses this historical data that we have, and uses the data from all the games that we have done. We've done a lot of mobile and web work, so this is mobile track, but as I said, we work or used to work in both parts of the gaming. So we use this data to build sort of an Excel spreadsheet. I will show you how it looks, but the numbers are blurred, sorry. But what's important is that we have this number like D1, D7, RPU and churn, and we actually allow them to vary over time. So our assumptions are that, okay, we are soft launching the game, and initially we know very little about our users, but this is sort of a baseline. And then we can enter, okay, what can we expect these numbers to be in month 2, month 3, month 4, 6, and so on, after soft launching, obviously. And this is good context for discussions with people who actually work on the products. Is this achievable? Does it make sense? Because ultimately, and this is important for us, is that this really translates into product P&L. And this is something that gets updated. So yes, we obviously at very beginning, you know, it's just an estimation like that. You just start, okay, let's say the retention is going to be 30%, and the RPU is going to be like that. Well, okay, maybe it's going to be like that, maybe not. But if it's going to be like that, we are going to make specific amount of money, and the cash flow of the product is going to look in this way. So if this happens, we're good. But then you have soft launch and say the retention is 25%, and are we good? Maybe, maybe not. But we have to update the model, and we have to talk about it. And this is sort of reality check for everyone involved in making the game. So I think this is the biggest value of doing something like that. So this is how it looks like. It's a bit complex. And as I said, I had to blur the numbers because I wasn't really sure if it's completely made up numbers or from some real product, and I'm not really at liberty to talk about our real KPIs. But what happens here is that we have, I don't have a laser pointer, but generally we have specific metrics listed month by month, and then we can see actually the curve of product revenue over time. This also assumes specific user acquisition cost and the number of organic registrations and so on and so on. So this was based on historical data, and this was actually built by our finance director. It's not my work. but it still falls into the same theme of things. So it's important to know that at our company it's really a lot of people working with this stuff and discussing these things. I believe it's really important to have this kind of sort of harness where, yes, there's the creative side of things, but you still need to know the numbers and need to talk about the numbers. So it sort of repeats what I said at the very beginning, but getting this to work isn't easy. And yes, you have to own your data, because really most solutions, like third-party solutions, will have limitations that you might not know at the very beginning of working with them, but at some point you will want to look at the data yourself or have an analyst that will look at the data. And this is something I believe is important. It's a trade-off. I'm not advising to startups that they should build their own data engineering, but at some scale of the company, it just makes sense. And this is not only about tools. This is also about the company culture, about people actually willing to speak about the numbers and be willing to accept that, yes, those numbers are what they are, and how are we going to deal with that? So my final thing that I would like to say is, and I hope everyone thinks this way, is that data exists only to help. It doesn't exist to replace people. And it sets a context for discussion, but still it's people who make games, and it's people who set the goals, and it's people who meet or do not meet those goals, and or believe or not. So things need to be measured, but I don't believe that making games just by the numbers works. It's a creative industry. And yes, it's easier to work with them, but they shouldn't be a religion. At the same time, they shouldn't be ignored. And I believe that for most companies is on the other end of the spectrum. So they kind of ignore those numbers and they say, okay, we are making a great game and that's it. This is probably more typical of an indie kind of attitude. But I do see danger in going too far to the other side of the spectrum. So finding this correct balance, I believe, is very important, and it takes time to find it. So think about it, and well, I hope that it did help you in some ways. As I said, it's just the way we do things. It might not work for you, but hopefully it will help you in some ways. So, thank you.
Okay, guys, any questions maybe?
I'm sorry, I've never heard about your companies, but if it's not a secret, how many games do you have currently?
You are asking about mobile or web, because in our company history, there is around 100. Currently, I think it's 6 or 7 in the app stores, but it depends on the market, because we have 2 games in the soft launch right now.
Okay, and do you have 100 people on board?
Yes.
And how many of them do this stuff? I mean, how many of them analyze data and update models for those games?
I'd say less than 10 total. But you know, it's for many people it's just part-time work. We have 3 full-time analysts, and currently 3 people working in data engineering platform full-time. So it's 6 people full-time. For the rest, like our finance director or me, it's mostly something that we do as an addition to other work. And obviously a lot of people in marketing do work on this at least part-time. Here we have Tomek, for example, who works on our some of our user acquisition activities and App Store optimization. So those people need to know this data. So it's kind of layered structure where you have data engineering at the very say bottom, but you can see it as being at the top. It's not that they're less important, but those people work on like ETL processes. So make sure that the data is clean, that it's in the right place, that the automated KPIs are calculated every day. So when people come to work, hopefully, say product manager, when he comes to work, is able to see the KPIs from the previous day and the user funnels from previous day, and then you have analysts who do more deeper analysis and ad hoc analysis, where they really run the queries to Spark or whatever tool they use at the point we sort of standardize on Spark. And then you have people who are actually users of that, and they sometimes create the models like me, like I did this website, but I wouldn't call it my line of work. It's just something that I do as an addition, and because I had a free time. So say 6 people full time, a lot of people part time. My thinking is, it shouldn't dominate the company, because if that, we would be probably analytics solution provider. We are a gaming company, but still it takes some effort.
Okay, so that was my another question. So you update those models daily, on a daily basis?
No, not really, because we don't make decisions on daily basis. When we talk about what happens daily, is that yes, we look at what happened to users yesterday, so user funnels and so on. This is more of a, I would say, operational part of working with product. This is very interesting to the team and to the product managers, but generally the cadence that the company works in is just Scrum Sprint, which is 2 weeks for us. And when we talk about large products, decisions is actually more of a month's kind of cadence. So we don't need to update it daily.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other questions, maybe?
How much do you find important to actually talk with users? I mean, interviews, reading reviews, maybe some questionnaire in app or in the internet to find out what they are seeking. How much do you find important in comparing to the hard data, right?
Extremely important. Shortly, but we do both, because talking with users is more of a product development process in my view, and this is extremely important. You have to do it. This is generally the short answer.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Okay, no questions. Okay, so thank you very much,
Okay,
Maciej.
so thanks again.